The East of England. A place primed for potential. But who is there to spread the word far and near that the East of England is open for business? It falls to one podcast to broadcast the full wattage of this region's brilliance around the world. This is Eastern Promise. I'm Mike Rigby, and welcome to Eastern Promise, the podcast that supports and promotes the East of England, championing the people and organisations that do amazing things across the region in science, business, technology, culture and the environment. This week, the brilliant Richard Powell OBE is showing the Eastern Promise team around a place that's very dear to his heart. RSPB Minsmere on the Suffolk coast. The Minsmere Nature Reserve is a vital habitat for many of our feathered friends. And on our visit, we'll find out what a huge contribution places such as Minsmere make to the region and the huge returns that flow from the natural economy. And finally, we'll find out whither you wander when weather worsens. Stand by for the full what, where and why in this week's windy and wet CROWDSOURCERY. And now news. You want it, we've got it. Space. No longer the final frontier for the East of England. Last week's Connected Innovation Conference at Adastral Park was hosted with aplomb by Chief Operating Officer of Tech East Tim Robinson, and attendees were treated to a keynote speech from Mid-Norfolk MP and Minister for Science and Innovation, George Freeman, alongside discussion and encouragement from leading thought thinkers from Norfolk and Suffolk. Eastern Promise was also on hand to witness the launch, not of the rocket variety, but no less exhilarating, of Space East. Because in space, no one can hear you dream, I asked our region's newly minted Major Tom, Space Cluster Manager Stuart Catchpole, to tell us more.
We have so much existing capability here. We have a history of companies doing great things that are already in the space sector or potentially might be able to benefit from opportunities in the space sector. And I think that's where the real excitement is. It's building on existing capabilities, building on existing technologies, existing know-hows, and taking it into the future and looking at the opportunities to bring it all together and how we can work together to make Space East such a really vibrant, supportive cluster.
My thanks to Stuart, and we'll give you much more detail on the Space Cluster launch event in a future episode. To whet your appetite in the meantime, go to spaceeast.co.uk and download the new Anglia Space Strategy. That was the news from the East of England. To share your stories with the region, send them to Eastern Promise at newsdesk@easternpromise.site. There's no small amount of irony in the fact that when we use the term ecosystem nowadays, we most often prefix it with words such as tech, financial or startup. By superimposing its meaning on man-made things, we are perhaps betraying how much technology has cocooned us away from the natural world, and how little we understand the ecological processes upon which all life depends. What would David Attenborough say? In an overwhelmingly rural and coastal region, such as the East of England, understanding the importance of maintaining and protecting biodiversity isn't just critical, it's existential. But here's the thing, if you think that investing in biodiversity is a burden, then it's time to think again. In fact, so rich and complex is the East of England's biosphere that it provides unparalleled opportunities in the green economy, creating employment, generating income, reducing and absorbing carbon emissions, and offering priceless support to other areas of our economy, such as tourism and leisure. To find out more about the extraordinary opportunities nature offers in the green economy, the Eastern Promise team accepted the very generous invitation of Richard Powell OBE and headed out to RSPB Minsmere on the Suffolk coast. Richard Powell OBE, thank you, good morning, and thank you for inviting Eastern Promise to come to RSPB Minsmere on a glorious Suffolk morning. And I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself in a second and give you the history, but I just want to spend a quick second or two introducing a new member of Team Eastern Promise, Sally Osborne. Lovely to have you with us.
And it's lovely to be here as well, thank you.
You're very welcome, it's lovely to see you here. So Richard, could you tell us just something about your backstory and how you come to be here, and you're going to now show us around Minsmere, but tell us the Richard Powell story.
Richard Powell story. Well, crikey, I suppose I was born in Great Yarmouth, so a Yarmouth bloater, as I think they call them. Yeah, I was born and bred in this part of the world, and I've spent all my life out in the outside world and in the natural environment. And as they always say, there's a teacher at school that inspires you. I had a Mr. Kitchener in the Priory School in Great Yarmouth who, looking back on it, probably didn't like to be in a classroom, so took us outside for lots of walks and lots of nature walks, and that really was where this whole my career started, I suppose, and the inspiration of being outside. And I then I've worked in the natural environment and in the charity world all my life. So I spent time managing the community programme agency work for Norfolk County Council, and then I became Senior Reserve Manager for the RSPB, looking after reserves from Scotland to London at one point, but mostly in the east of England. Yeah. And then in 1994, when the RSPB decided to regionalise, they asked if I'd set up the regional team, so I became Regional Director in 94. And built up all the reserves and the interaction with people and the economy and all that sort of thing from that point. So I did 25 years with the RSPB. I then moved off to help the student union at the UEA do their business planning, and then became National Trust Regional Director for a couple of years, looking at after the properties for the National Trust. And then I became pretty much a sort of an environmental consultant, I suppose, after that, working with lots of different charities, lots of different organisations, looking at their governance and business plans, but also inspiring a big picture debate and a big picture thinking of how the economy and the environment interacts and plays part of. So worked with the LEP on the Green Economy Pathfinder, and with some amazing guys, Keith Moore and Ian Dunnett, as people you know well, in producing that sort of thing. So I've always worked in the natural environment. I've always been a champion for the natural environment. I've always been a person that likes to promote, challenge, and be critical for the natural environment.
I think what's important, and one of the reasons we are here today, is that there is so much that we can get from the natural environment as beyond love of nature, beyond health and well-being, which are very important, but it actually plays a huge role in the economy of our region with the people. And we're in this really lovely cafe, modern cafe building with a shop and fantastic cup of coffee we've just had. And you get people coming here, paying their money to go out and explore nature. And there's so much that it can do as well beyond that in terms of managing the environment, and I hope we're going to come on to that. But do you want to just reflect a bit for us on the role that nature plays in the economy?
Yeah, I mean, the environment underpins the economy, really. It's your air, your water, your land, your soils. So the way that we manage and work with the environment does underpin a lot of our economy. And then on the macro scale, the tourism industry in Norfolk and Suffolk, 4 billion to the local economy.
Well, we couldn't have asked for a better morning for it,
no,
really.
It's gorgeous, isn't it? Yeah, it's gorgeous.
Mm.
It's the signs of spring waking up, isn't it? Yeah. It's just...
And the wildlife here, you see, is because everybody's the wildlife are completely used to people, and so they're not tame, they're wild, but they will be tolerant of you for 2 or 3 reasons. One is the fence, and nobody goes there. And second is that they're so used to people just wandering that they're not threatening. And so even with children here, you can put your hand out with some seed or some mealworms on, and the robins and chaffinches will come and feed off your hand, you know. So there's that sort of safe feeling, if you like, for wildlife.
And that real connection at
Yes,
a very young age.
Which, of course, then gives you that huge connection for young people, yeah. So you find you get some really close views of the wildlife here, because it's used to people walking round and staying within a boundary, as it were.
Tremendous feeling of peace as well that you get here. You don't experience that many places, I find, these days.
No, it is quite quiet, and you can. There's places here that you can just disappear to and be completely either on your own, but not too far away. If in case of, you want to feel isolated, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
I noticed the management was interesting on the drive-in as well. That a lot of the fallen trees had been left.
Yes. Well, in the
rather than
87
cleared.
storm, this was completely cut off. The road was completely cut off. And as it happened, I was working with Norfolk County Council at the time. We chainsawed our way in as the Minsmere team chainsawed their way out to just clear the roads. And we met in the middle. But the decision was taken quite quickly to leave all the wood, because obviously dead wood is great for invertebrates.
Yeah.
But where we could, we either pushed the trees back into the holes or left them on the floor, knowing that they would regrow. And so actually, if you look at most of the trees there, you can see that they're actually sort of regrowing. They've rerouted and regrown.
That's brilliant.
And so lots of the trees here you can't deal with, because this was all part of the D-Day practice areas. Really? And so lots of the oaks have great chunks of shrapnel in them. So if you put a chainsaw through it, it's too dangerous. So another reason for leaving quite a lot of the main wood was that it was too dangerous to cut up. Yeah, so there's the North Sea.
The sea!
It's such an incredible view. You've got the coast, you can see going around the coast, can't you? And then you've got the heathland coming over here, the reed beds in front of us, and then the woodland, and it takes you back round past more reed beds to Sizewell.
And all this land in the middle was flooded in the 1940s. It was part of the war effort. Obviously, to stop the Panzer tanks moving in. And that's when the avocet returned to Britain after 200 odd years. And so in 1947, the avocets first bred here, and then in Hyde, which is just on the edge of that wood, the Nature Conservancy Council, which was born in 1949, that's where they pretty much made the decisions to create national parks in Britain. So national parks were thought of here when they were overlooking pretty much what you see today, a flooded landscape. This was the site in 1971 where only one marsh harrier was left in the UK, and that was breeding here. Bearded tits also, so avocets, bearded tits, marsh harriers. It's an incredibly important place for the springboarding of biodiversity. Now, I mean, when I first started work, I used to sleep in hides to protect them from egg thieves and from marsh harriers. There was about 9, 10, 15 pairs in the UK.
Yeah.
Now, of course, you're looking at 200 or 300 pairs in the UK. Incredible. And they've now come from they're still under threat, but they've come back to being a stably breeding bird in this thing. And it was because of Minsmere that it happened.
That is incredible. So much history here, like we said earlier. So the avocet, was that kind of a deliberate or unintended consequence of the flooding of the land?
Yeah, it wasn't deliberate at all. We had no idea they'd come back. Yeah. But with the war, of course, this part of the world was devoid of people because it was mined, and part of the military establishment. You had Orford Nest just down the road, which, of course, was a First World War airfield site originally, and then became a part of the whole military thing right through to the 50s, right through to the 80s in theory. So there wasn't many people. So once you've re-flooded an area and stopped farming it intensively, well then biodiversity comes back quite quickly, and then you then manage it. And you could argue that we've made more money out of this land since the war than you ever would out of it being in agriculture.
Well, I have to say, there's been no shortage of people walking past with very expensive camera and optic equipment. So, yeah, should we march on and that way, I'm assuming.
Yeah, we can get
Sally mentioned Sizewell. Now, I met the people on the RSPB stand at the Norwich Science Festival, and obviously they had some words to say about Sizewell, but this being a sort of a positive, try and keep things on the positive, what positives are you going to be able to derive from Sizewell C in terms of investment, in terms of improvements, or is it going to be a case of that's an argument we've still got to be had?
Environmentally, that's an argument you've still got to be having, because you could argue that it's very old technology. It's going to take 30 years or something to build and come on stream. It's extremely expensive. It's amazingly destructive to in its process of building. It's only green because it doesn't produce carbon dioxide, but it produces 80,000-year-old afterlife of waste. So it's one of those real debates you still need to have. I struggle to find any major positives for it. I think it's on an eroding coast, a coast that is lacking in water. So desalination plants are going to have to be built to the water that will be needed to run it. You could argue could stop housing developments and people from being in different areas. So it still needs a debate. I personally don't think it's economically viable, but that's just my personal view.
How do you view fusion?
Fusion, I think, I'm quite a supporter of it. I mean, we're quite away from that. I think it might be with hydrogen one of the future things. Energy is a really weird thing. I mean, because you could replace all the wind turbines that we have today for about 3.2 billion. So in other words, you could double the number of wind turbines we have for 3.2. That's going to cost something like 40 billion, and that's in today's estimates. That's not in so you could argue that you could spend much more money on tidal and wind to create that short-term gain, whilst you look for that longer-term thing. Now, others will say you haven't got time to do all that. We need energy today. Well, you're not going to get energy from that today, and it's so it's one of those ones where do you invest more in better? And I mean, the tide, we haven't even exploited the tide, and this part of the world has huge opportunities for tidal, and it still has huge opportunities for more wind. So I think, there's other things we could do to, and what my worry is that you end up in 50 years' time, you'll have Sizewell Island, and you'll go across a bridge to get to the power station, and for some reason we've got to spend billions on protecting what is, a very nasty thing if it goes bang. Luckily, we've never had one go bang in this country, but and they're very good at what they do, but we could do so much more with renewables, I think.
I think we've got an interview coming up with Jonathan Reynolds of OBE.
Yes, I know Jonathan well.
And there's so much. I mean, we're in Hydrogen Week.
Yes.
After all,
yes.
There are he said quickly, there are so many opportunities from renewables. I mean, this region really is and should be rightly leading the way on that. Yeah. Because we've got the technology, we've got the expertise, and more than that, it's a chance to regenerate places like Lowestoft properly.
With longer-term jobs.
Exactly. We've got expansion to the port there with the Leaf facility. But we've just sort of passed over the shingle, and we're now describe where we are, Richard, if you could.
Well, we're literally on that stretch of the coast, which is. In winter storms becomes inundated. The sea will come over this bank, and so we'll be walking through sort of sea puddles, if you like. But that's part of that natural absorption of the waves and water. As you can see here, in the 1950s, they redesigned the tank armour and the tank defence things from the 1940s, and again that now forms part of the sea defence. But we're not that far from the sea. But this is that dynamic absorption area, if you like, of the sea, and then just over there is the freshwater scrape system of the RSPB's reserve. The scrape was artificially made. It was done by bulldozers in the army in the 1960s to create a flat, open, controllable water area to bring fresh water. So you had the sea, and then you bring fresh water into here, and that allowed you to create a different type of invertebrate habitat. And as you can see just over the top here, it's always full of birds. It's internationally important, but originally it was man-made, and fish heads and things were dug into it when at first to try and nutrify it for all sorts of things. So all sorts of different ways of the past management. Nowadays it's all done by controlling of water and water levels, and you control the salinity so that you give that consistency to the invertebrates, because invertebrates are one of the first beasts that are affected by sea level and salinity, and if you flooded that with seawater and it laid there for a couple of weeks, it would take out all the invertebrates, which takes about 5 to 7 years to rebuild. So if you get salt inundation, it denudes the land both for farming and for wildlife for quite a long time till you rebuild that invertebrate process. And it's the invertebrates that gives the substructure of life. So when you take out an ancient woodland, for instance, there is a whole motorway of fungus underneath that is completely lost. And it's that motorway of fungus that actually gives the base for all the other invertebrates that go above it. So that's again why there is not any one single species you work for. You have to look at big picture totality in ecology, because there's so much that is dependent on so much other things.
I mean, how well is this understood by policymakers? Because what you're describing to me, I mean, Sally's much more wildlife savvy than me, but I had no idea. Your expression says not very.
Not very, no. And again, it's because there's a different mindset of looking at things. You know, you're looking at the economic viewpoint only, which is why you've always got to argue about the three legs of the stool. You've got to argue for the community, you've got to argue for the environment, and you've got to argue for the economy. And that's why changing the way that we do things has got to be so important, because people don't know that. And so it's easy to say, oh, well, you know, a housing development here and is not going to affect anything, and it probably won't. But by the time you've done 10 of them, there's a cumulative effect. Yeah. If you take out nature, you take out the stuff that you can't see. And it's because you can't see it that makes people sort of don't understand it. It's like the sea, you know, wiping out large areas of fish nurseries. Because you can't see it doesn't mean to say it isn't happening. And you would never do it on the land. You would never clear fell, Windsor Park, because there'd be an outroar. But you quite happily you'll wipe out a huge area of the sea just by dragging trawlers over it or by taking out gravels and things. So again, it's understanding your impact, and it's what we don't do in our economy and at school sometimes, although that's changing enormously, is you look at that bigger picture impact, and that's the bit that we have to understand. Yeah,
I think that's quite a key message.
It is.
That we as a society need to look at the bigger picture in everything, and I think we've become quite specialised at looking at parts and not looking at the whole picture together.
Exactly, a holistic view.
And it's, you know, it's sometimes you can understand it. People are busy, you know, the economy is busy. People are desperate to create jobs and things. But, you know, one of my bugbears is that, you know, whenever you do something for the economy, tens of thousands, or the environment, I should say, no, the economy, tens of thousands of jobs are always promised. You know, 10,000 here, 10,000 there, 10,000 there. The Western Link Road in Norwich is going to create 20,000 jobs. And you think, well, no one ever goes back and says, well, did they do it?
Did it, yeah.
And Sizewell B, when it was built, was going to create 20,000 jobs in Leiston. And, you know, we're now in Sizewell C, which is going to produce 80,000 jobs, apparently, in Leiston. Mm-hmm. But Leiston is still one of the most deprived areas of Suffolk, and is still under, you know, government handouts, and because it wasn't there. So what happened to the 80,000 jobs, and where are they? So we've got to be better at running our statistics. I'm sure there's jobs created. Yes. You know, but it certainly wasn't 10,000. And maybe in the Suffolk coast there was 10,000, but was that Sizewell or was that Minsmere?
Yeah. Well, there you go. It's like focusing on working of a clock by focusing on only one number.
Yes, yes.
And only worrying about when the hands pass through.
Yes, yes. And I'm a real believer of that. You know, that bigger thinking, that joining up of and giving space to it all actually creates a better and longer term economy.
Yes.
And I'm sure there's real opportunities. And when Jonathan will tell you, when you interview him, the wind industry, when I worked with Jonathan years ago to write the first renewable energy strategy for the region, we were struggling to get people to accept that there'd be 10 to 11%. It's now something like 24%.
Yeah.
So when we did the first recycling plan for Norfolk County Council, the councillors were really unhappy to go over 12%. Now it's 68 or 70% recyclable. So it's about challenging and pushing and understanding and taking risks, I suppose. And you should take risks to enhance the environment as much as you would taking risks to do the economy.
A very interesting point you raised, because, and I was talking about this with someone from the UEA only the other day, but there's an event called Sink the City that's held in Norwich in November. Yeah. And one of the teams was a student from the East Norfolk Sixth Form. And her pitch was an app that would tell you, could this be recycled? If it can be recycled, where can you recycle it? If it can't be recycled, what can it be reused for?
Yeah.
And she got through the first sift, and then the second sift, and a team formed around her because everyone sort of saw the value really quickly. It was really great to see. And at the end, she pitched to the judges on the last day. And one of the questions she got asked was, well, how's this going to make any money? And her answer, quick as a flash, was, well, it's not about the money, is it? It's about saving the planet. And the cheer that went up was incredible. So you're absolutely right to sort of focus on sort of the coming generations as a source of hope and positivity. But I think we need to take a lesson from them and get on with it.
And, I don't underestimate the sort of hill we have to climb in changing this mentality and changing this thinking, because we've done it for so long, and we've had since the war huge amounts of resources and the ability to do whatever we like. We now are getting to the point where we haven't got lots of resources. Yeah. We are using 2.5, 3 planets every year. The clock that they do to produce when we run out of time for resources is now, when I was at school, was in sort of October. It's now in August. So it is one of those things where it's going to be difficult. Not everybody's going to like it, and there'll be all sorts of people arguing against it. But we do have to start thinking about it. We do have to start debating it. We do have to start looking at how we make money in a different way. I'm not anti-profit, no. But you've just got to do it in a very different way than you do it today.
But what I find particularly exciting in doing this, and the people you meet, like yourself, hugely impressive and eloquent and informed people, speakers, is that there is a huge opportunity here for our region to be in the lead.
Absolutely.
And we need to seize that, and we can't just sort of go, oh well, scratch our heads and think, oh, it's always got to be agriculture and the odd bit of nice, fancy stuff here and there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, renewables and the whole green circular economy. Norfolk and Suffolk could have grabbed that with both hands when we did the Green Pathfinder, and it's still there to grab. It's still there, I think, to create all sorts of different opportunities. But it's all about financing and who finances it, and who invests in it, and where does that money come from, and will they invest in risk? And so I know it's not an easy solution, but we've got to start thinking about it. In fact, we've got to start doing it.
Yes, indeed we do. I think Saul Humphrey, who sadly couldn't be with us today, is already an eloquent voice for his industry, the construction sector.
Absolutely.
On things like embedded carbon and operational carbon and the sustainability argument. And that's why he's involved himself in some really exciting projects.
Yes, yeah. And Norfolk and Suffolk is, got a great opportunity because it is also under a great threat. The sea level rise and climate change will affect us. The sea will come in certain places. You can't defend everything, and you can't keep pumping concrete into places. And so that's already inspired people like the Environment Agency and the developers to look for carbon-free concrete opportunities and things like that. There's more concrete pumped than there is anything else in this world, and that's one of the big problems, you know. So finding different materials, we're going to run out of resources. It's great doing electric cars, but where's the lithium going to come from, and all those sorts of things, you know. And there's a interesting plant I visited once with the Environment Agency at Royston, which extracts all the gold and plutonium from catalytic converters.
Yes.
So that's all about that recycling, reuse, and renew. It's about how do we stop throwing it away and use it as part of the economy.
Yeah, we definitely need to improve on the recycling, don't we? And think more carefully when we create something about how we can recycle it or how we can repurpose it in the future once it's used up.
And as we said earlier, there are a lot of big companies that get this stuff. You know, BMW and Land Rover, Jaguar Land Rovers, most of their vehicles are something like 98% recyclable now. You know, in the olden days, you'd have just put it down the scrapyard. But we've got to build things with recycling and longevity in mind, you know.
Reverse that idea of the throwaway culture.
Yes.
Back to the days where you used to get money for your empties.
Yes, absolutely, yes. Yeah, we used to, forever going around trying to find Corona bottles to take back to the shop to get some sweets. I remember 8 fruit salad chews for a penny, and then it became 4, then it became 2, and now they're about 10 pence each, I think. But you do get that sense of peace and
you really do.
well-being, don't you? Yeah. You can't hear the sea at the moment. You can't hear the birds. In the spring, the cacophony you get on the scrape is phenomenal. I mean, the noise is just amazing. You know.
I think in many ways, probably better we're doing it now. Sorry.
And that's a great thing about somewhere like Minsmere. There's not many times the year, apart from August, where it's pretty quiet and has a sort of a bit of a lack of interest. But of course, in August, by that time, you've got Aldborough and the fish and chips and the ice cream. But so nature can actually extend tourism in quite a way.
I almost stood at the top. We could hear the skylarks, couldn't we? And there was a muntjac deer, I don't know if you noticed, walking around the reed beds. And and obviously we all heard the goose go over.
We did.
And it's a great place for being able to experience things you would not normally hear. So if you come in April, stand in the car park, you'll hear booming bitterns. And they're only in certain wetlands. When I was at the RSPB, we found a way of recording each voice, and each voice is independent, individual, and you put it on an oscilloscope and you can see, bitten 1, bitten 2, and there was 9 in the UK. We'd overestimated them for years because they can throw their voice, and so we eventually found that there was only 9 left, and we then had to completely change the way that wetlands were managed. Across the whole of the UK to be able to bring back the bittens. Now there are over 100 pairs, and it's just another success story. But a bitten call is incredibly emotive. You can feel it in your chest when it calls. It's such a deep, booming noise. And a lot of nature allows you to react in different ways. If you watch a red kite or a short-eared owl, they're the 2 species I always say look into your soul, because they're synonymous with people. Red kites used to be all over London eating the bodies and the waste in Tudor London. And robins, again, are very synonymous with people. And it's that interaction that we miss, and being stared at by a red kite is quite an interesting concept.
I mean, we've noticed where we live, the inclusion and increase of, well, first of all, it was the buzzards that came in, and just recently, in the last couple of years, the red kites have come back to where we are, and it's just stunning to watch them.
Biodiversity loss is massive. I mean, we've lost about 75% of our biodiversity in this country in the last 70 years, and everything. When I was at work, I used to say to people in talks I did, when did you last see a pile of snail shells on your path? And that's because we don't have any song thrush anymore. And we don't have those because of the chemicals we use and the sort of hatred of slugs and snails. And if you're a gardener, you can understand that. You can if it's your prized dahlia that's gone, you can understand why people. But there are ways to do that naturally, and there's ways to garden differently so that you actually use nature to protect yourself against other things. Marigolds by your tomatoes, to increase pollinators and that sort of thing. But we do have to reverse this massive decline, and the massive decline comes from our industrialisation of many processes we do.
So, Richard Powell, let's just imagine that we've very wisely put you in charge of making this effort. Where do we start? What's sort of day one, job one on that list, do you think?
I think it's understanding our economics and where we want our economics to go in the future. It's how do we make our economics work, I think. We've got to look at, human populations are always expanding. We've got more people living in this country. Allegedly, they want more houses, etc. It's how do we do that in a way that works with nature rather than against it. It's how do we bring nature back into being one of our fundamental building blocks of the future of the economy, really. The marsh harrier.
Oh yeah.
Just gently.
I was just watching it over the reed beds.
Now, they used to be migratory. They used to go back to Spain and North Africa. But since we've changed the way that we manage our wetlands, etc., they're now here all the time. And that's Minsmere again, that helped that whole process. It's an incredibly important part of our history, Minsmere.
The bitterns don't migrate, do they? So
no, bitterns. They tend to. Most birds migrate. So sometimes we'll get in the winter we get a huge influx of lapwings and starlings and blackbirds from Scandinavia as it gets colder. So they move, and ours tend to go to Devon and further south. So there is a bit of a movement, but they don't migrate the distances. Things like the tiny little blackcap or willow warblers and swallows and swifts that come all the way from South Africa in a single hit.
Is that another marsh harrier there?
Yes, yeah, that looks like it. You can have over nearly 40 in the sky here. That's a female. You can see the yellow head. And the scrape is where the avocets are breeding now. And there's a big cacophony. Oh, there's an egret. Yeah.
Yes.
You can see the egret on there because there was a mill here, a wind pump, and that's all part of the old sluice pump.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And managing the reed beds, you see, because nowadays we don't, because of the phosphorus levels that comes off the land, our reed isn't as good as it used to be for thatching. There is still good thatching, and the thatching industry is still thriving in the Broads, but we don't sell this reed for thatching. Most of it comes in from Poland, Romania, the Danube Delta. So us protecting Eastern Europe and their farming system and helping that work in a different way has always been another great challenge. So
this reed's not harvested; it's just left.
We cut it every other year in different areas. You can see where that other egret is flying. Yeah. That's just been cut, and that allows new reed to grow through, and it also takes away the sort of litter build-up, because the trouble with reed beds is they always want to turn into an oak forest. So eventually, their leaves go down, and they grow. Then nettles come in, then birch come in, then oak come in, and then they extract hundreds of gallons of water per day, and so therefore the wetlands dry out. So we're holding, if you like, this landscape in succession.
Can you sell the reeds? Do you sell these reeds?
No, we don't here. No. We have conic ponies, Polish ponies, that help with the management of it. So they'll go through, because we don't have any big herbivores in this country anymore, although red deer of this part of the world do actually help. But they create paths and things, and those paths are feeding and nursery areas for wildlife. And conic ponies have to have woody material in their diet. So in the sort of Bicheltra marshes and Polish marshes, you'd always get things like European bison and things. So Highland cows, belted Galloway a little bit, they also eat woody material as part of their diet. They need it as part of their roughage. and conic ponies are allowed to range through here. Shall we walk back round the scrape? That'll probably be the best bet.
I think getting people out somewhere like this, you know, we talk about how can we make people change their thinking. Well, the first thing is you need to be out and experiencing it, and then when you put a value on it, that's when you start to change your experience.
And it's not everyone's cup of tea. There's loads of people I've taken out on a walk who think this is far too muddy, and I remember bringing out several journalists out here. You know, they turn up in sort of very pointed leather shoes, which are very fashionable in London, but we do have to supply them with welly boots. But having said that, you know, they went away completely inspired, you know, and these landscapes inspire song and music and painting, you know, it's all part of what humans are, and, you know, you need that to let that into your life every now and then, really. Benjamin Britten down the road, you know, it's all part of our culture, really.
And I think as well, with the rate that technology is progressing and life's changing, and just having that space to come and take a step out and reset to yourself.
And you find people, I find it really interesting, because nowadays, you know, again, you know, you walk through the middle of Norwich and people have got no time and they bump into you occasionally and they scowl at you and all sorts of different things. You do still get quite a few will say hello as you go. But standing waiting for you guys, nobody walked past me without saying hello. And I've never met any of them before, you know. And so you do get that, you do get a change in human behaviour in places like this. And if they've had a really good day, when they leave, 9 times out of 10 they're in a far better mood when they arrive.
It's like a breath out, isn't it? It's just...
I think it's so different as well. I mean, we live in the Brecks, and it's so different from anywhere that's around us. It's such an open landscape.
Yeah, well, the Brecks is amazingly unique. I mean, it's a lovely landscape as well. Again, a very different way of looking at landscapes.
I've got a stone in my shoe.
I'll cut that bit, it's fine.
Sorry about that. I was like, I can't walk anymore with that stone in my shoe. Just do the other one as well. It's the sand in that one. There we go. Should have put my walking boots on. Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a little egret. When I first started work, little egrets were European. And again, they first bred on Brownsea Island down near the Isle of Wight.
Yeah.
And they were on 24-hour guard and very secretive. You didn't tell anybody they were there. Now, you'll get 50, 60 here in a roost. You know, they've taken a climate change again. It's just, you know, they're one of the species that moved in. Collared dove was another. Now, of course, you just see them all the time, which is wonderful. The cattle egret are now arriving, which is the bigger, the white heron, as it were. They're now breeding here. Spoonbills are breeding here. And they were always an iconic bird to get back into the East Coast, spoonbill. They were in Texel, which is exactly opposite us in Holland. And by creating the wetlands on the coast, we were hoping they'd come back sooner, but it took, you know... Took
them a while.
But they're here now.
How many spoonbills have you got?
Not many. I think we're in the 20s. Yeah, they're establishing again, which is the key thing. When the avocets arrived, you know, it was only about four or five pairs originally, and then it got to 20, and so on and so forth. And Havigate Island was incredibly important, which is where we would have gone down to Havigate Island. That was amazingly important. That was a military shell hit the edge of the island, let all the water in, and suddenly completely flooded what were marshes into an island, and that's where the avocets really got established. So here became a bit busy, so they moved to Havigate, and then they sort of came back here. You know. And when I was there, we bought the land on the mainland, which had the gun emplacements, which blew the hole in Havigate. So there's, you know, you try and tie up all this history. You know.
It seems to follow, doesn't it? It's the military goes somewhere, create havoc, pull out, and nature goes, well, I'll have that.
Yeah, I'll have that. Yeah, nature's really good at taking back. Yeah.
It just reclaims things so quickly.
That's why, you know, people get very excited about brownfield sites, because actually, you know, once humans walk away from them, it's amazing how quickly species come back. And some species, because they love turnover and sort of industrial sites. You know, so again, it's how do you live with how do you create a conurbation which actually has some bits of wild spaces in it. You know, a very highly mown, chemically sprayed green in the middle of a conurbation is not necessarily what. But because we're all conditioned to not like scruffy, you know.
Yes.
Edward VII, I blame for a lot of this. I'm sure he was on a spectrum of some kind, but he was the man that in the big estates would, paint stones white and have gangs of people mowing the lawn to the nth degree and creating thousands of birds to be shot, etc., you know. And of course, that's how they followed. And you had people like Capability Brown and these great landscapers that created these sort of manicured sites, and they're great and they have places, you know, there's no, but you don't want the world like it.
Passing the South Hyde, and I have to say I've never seen a hide that size. It's quite the facility.
Yeah, they're quite they get quite busy. We'll go in the next one, shall we?
Okay, yeah, let's have a look.
Inside. Originally they were single story, then they became double story, and then you ended a piece on the front. And, yeah, and especially in summer, in spring and summer, because of again migrations. You know, Britain is unfrozen, so it's a huge migratory spot for birds. Birds will come from Greenland and Russia and call in here. Most of them come in a single flight, so that's why wetlands and things like the Wash are so important, because they fly 3,500 miles and then have to feed when they arrive. Certain birds will fly from Japan to New Zealand to breed, and as they fly in that distance they eat certain parts of their body, they absorb certain parts of their body, so when they arrive they need places to feed, so that when they feed they then rebuild those bits of bodies that they've absorbed. So you need motorway service stations.
Yes. And the UK is a good pit stop.
And the UK is a very good one, yeah. Each square metre of mud or square foot of mud in the Wash is worth 18 Mars bars. So that just shows you the sort of calorific value of the Wash.
It's a good way of thinking about it.
Braden water, the Wash, unbelievably important.
Just going back to what you were saying about brownfield sites, one of the things I found interesting is the way that brownfield sometimes seems to be a bit of an elastic term that can mean anything you want it to mean in the context of any argument about anything. So in this sort of world, in your sort of world, do you sort of have to say some kind of brownfield is just not suitable, too contaminated, or it's, you know, some brownfield is going to be snapped up by developers no matter what you do? So what's your approach to brownfield?
Again, I think it's a case of being able to look at that big picture. So, for instance, Swanscombe down in Kent, they wanted to build a huge sort of Disney-type park down there, but it had been left so long, it's now internationally important for invertebrates. So you've got to question whether that, again, is the right place. So, are there other brownfield sites you could take? Other brownfield sites you can lose, but what you can do is put in corridors and places for wildlife and biodiversity to move. And again, we don't do that very often, you know. So when you design something, you have to pack it full of everything for allegedly for the economy.
Yeah.
But actually, you could leave stripes and hedges and ponds and all sorts of things. Again, it's planning in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
And then, of course, someone will say, well, that costs to look after it. You know, we can't do that because we're developers, we're builders, we're not landscape. But there are other organisations, Groundwork East, for instance, and other charities who will manage that sort of stuff. And OK, there's a legacy, and part of your profit, maybe, you put into an account that just sits there and ticks over and then pays for the management over the next 30 years or something, you know. So it's, again, the way you design it. And you can't save every brownfield site, you can't save every site, but we can actually develop them in a way that actually allows things to move through it. BugLife are doing a thing called beelines across the country. Really? Hugely important project. Matt Shardlow might be another one you'd like to interview. He's based in Peterborough, and they're creating lines of pollinating flowers and hedgerows and things right the way across the UK. Scottish government have absorbed it and taken it on. The Welsh government has. we're lukewarm in England, but it's still happening. But it's that's to create passageways for pollinators, and it's not just bees; it's bumblebees and flies and wasps and things. Oh yeah, there you go. Future bird watchers.
Very happy to be here.
You've probably heard a big family passing through, all armed with binoculars, which is good to see.
Yeah, you can get backpacks from the centre, which has got notebooks and identifiers and binoculars.
Wow.
And so if you come and want to know what you're looking at, you can hire a backpack.
So does Minsmere run educational sessions then?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's got a big educational programme. One of the last things I did before I left the RSPB was create the new Wild Centre, or help project manage and sign that off, which is an area where kids can just run free and make some noise and build dens and do that sort of stuff. And they used, I don't know now, but they used to have 4 or 5 full-time teacher naturalists on site. Which is all part of the sort of between 7 and 11 is a crucial time. If you get caught between 7 and 11, you remember it for life. In whatever you do, normally by the time you get a teenager, you're often thinking of other things. In your 20s, it's all sex, drugs, rock and roll, all that sort of stuff. Well, it wasn't for me, but for others it might be. And then when you have children yourself, you come back. But if you've been through understanding this place between 7 and 11, you bring that back in your 30s. Yeah.
Ah, here we are, the next hide.
Yeah, shall we go and have a look?
Let's have a nose. Certainly is busy.
Got a yellow beak.
Yeah.
From Russia.
There's another one over there, isn't there? Cute. Oh, thank you.
So the islands are built all man-made, and they will be places for breeding birds during the spring. So again, you'll have a cacophony of noise, you'll have avocets, you'll have black-headed gulls, common terns, little terns, obviously a whole host of ducks, and the vegetation is managed. So this is a very managed area, the scrape, whereas the reed bed is pretty sort of semi-natural. Right. So each year they'll come out here with brush cutters and cut the vegetation back, that sort of thing. So it's quite peaceful today. There's another egret in the middle there. You get all sorts of rare ducks come through in the winter, because again, these sort of places are, because they're quiet and because the food value is so high, you'll get lots of migratory birds. So Titchwell, Minsmere and Titchwell, Cly, all these sort of places are amazingly important for migrants and therefore twitchers, because people will travel from Shetland to come here. You see, we've walked full circles. There's the walk and that's where we stood to see the sea originally. Yeah, this was all done by the army for something to do with bulldozers and things. The warden, who called Bert Axel, who was a real character, in the early days of the RSPB, he would get lots of people to do for nothing. He was a fiery character. It's so well known. Lots of my generation of wardens, if you like, went through his school, and you worked hard, and you didn't say anything out of turn. And he disliked people. He was not a people person, really. So that in the RSPB archives, there's all sorts of memos which said, "How dare you send 32 people? You said you were only going to send 25, and I had 32 turn up, because you were only allowed in on Tuesdays and Thursdays, doors shut." And another set of emails I saw, memos, I saw handwritten memos, of course, in those days. "Yes, but I understand you have to repair the hides. You can buy a pound of nails, but see if you can borrow a hammer." It's a different world in those days. There's when you work for the RSPB, you have to remember, and you do remember, the guys are really good. It costs quite a bit to manage these sort of places, but at the same time, when you're buying stuff or working stuff, that every pound you use is a membership's money, is members' money. So you have to be very, very frugal and good at what you do. But it's not cheap.
No.
There's some big fat avocets over there. Big fat avocets over there.
They're probably well puffed up.
They are.
That's why the avocet is the RSPB logo. So this time of the year, you just gently lower the water levels to expose the islands. You'll raise the water levels in the winter to kill off some of the vegetation you don't want. And then by lowering the water levels, that allows that consistency again for the invertebrates to grow. And then during the summer, that will gradually lower. And so you expose more mud. And then you, and when you don't let it go really dry, because obviously that would again kill the invertebrates. So it's again managing that. And all that water comes from the reed bed. So you're using different sections of the reserve to store water or move water or hold water to manage other bits.
So how finely is that controlled, that flow of water? Is that just literally someone going up and opening a gate, a sluice gate, or is that computer controlled, or is it?
No, it's literally sluice gates. You've got measuring bars,
I see.
things there. But no, it'll be a warden coming down first thing in the morning, and it's for the senior site manager here. It's just guess. It's just experience. You know, you can see the level and you know the level, and you just let the water in. You know it's going to take a day for the water to go from one end to the other, sort of thing, as you let it in, and then but you do use the gauge boards quite a lot.
I think it seems so right that you trust it to someone who really knows the environment, knows and has the experience and expertise to know what to do, and just by instinct almost, rather than leaving it to the vagaries of software.
Software is really good, but software doesn't have that nuance that humans do. Yeah, and it's the same. If you talk to the Environment Agency, they'll tell you the same. When you flood the ooze washers, and that's what the ooze washers is there for, is to absorb all that water from Bedford and upstream. When it used to be a man doing it, actually there was probably slightly greater control, but now it's just the volume is so much because of obviously urbanisation and all that sort of thing, that actually the computers are probably the best, but a computer with a human...
Yeah, it's got to have that human element.
The ability to override is always a good thing. And we're at a point now where quite a lot is moving, so things are moving back north, and southern birds are moving through to breed. So that, you know, it's that general moving. So those that are breed in the Arctic is now starting to thaw. So they'll move up to Scotland, then they'll go to Norway, and then they'll go to Russia, or they'll go to Iceland and then Greenland. So things are now starting to move. And what you're getting also coming through is people are starting to see things like swallows in the south coast. They're now starting their migration to breed in the summer here. So Britain is a constant changing movement of nature. When my son was really young, he was about 7 or 8, we came here. I had to come here for work. For some reason, we were walking back from this hide. We just got to where these birch trees were. And there on your left was a bittern. And we all just froze, and he saw his first bittern here. And he's never forgotten that. No. And so we've stuck with him, you know. So.
Well, once bitten.
Yes, absolutely.
Have you seen them many since?
yeah, quite a few. I mean, when you come here, if you go into the bittern hide, which is the tower hide there, absolutely guaranteed to see them virtually. You know, I mean, it's rare that you come out of there not seeing bitterns or otters. Yeah, wetlands are...
Do you know how much carbon they absorb?
Tens of thousands of tonnes. I mean, across the world, wetlands are more important. They're the most important habitat for absorbing carbon, because the sea absorbs carbon as well. But as the sea gets warmer, it absorbs less carbon. So it's... but carbon sinks, you know, once you trap it into rotted vegetation, etc., you know, that goes into the substrate. So that's where they hold the water. Yeah. And reeds, for instance, will absorb chemicals and things from the water and from the air, and obviously with the trees giving off oxygen and also putting carbon, the carbon is going down through the tree into the soil. Yeah. So it's it's all part of that natural cycle, which is why, you know, you hear so many people say, you know, you can't lose the Amazon jungle, because it's you know, that is, not only does it produce most of the world's oxygen, it's also that, again, that big picture cycle of absorbing nutrients, etc.
Isn't it? The peat, their peat is very good at absorbing carbon as well, is that right?
Yeah, so yeah, absolutely, yeah. I mean, this is all peat because of the being a wetland. Yeah. So dead vegetation. And Britain was incredibly important for that, because post-glaciation, when the glacial outwashes finished, then you got the sort of emergent vegetation coming through, and so Britain is incredibly important for not only for heathland but also for peatlands.
So we've moved out of the reed beds into the woodland area now, haven't we?
Yes, you've literally just moved, and you can see gradually you're going up. So you're going up the sand dune system into sand and the heathland.
And there's incredible
Sculptures, yeah. I love sculptures in nature reserves. I think art and nature go really well.
They do, they certainly do.
No, I think it would be, this one is probably done, because this is our wild area for education area, so that's the where the sort of education unit is, and there's a big classroom up the top there. Yep. And I should imagine it's part of that. You can see the wood all around it. They probably sit there and look at the different things that are on it.
Education's one of my key interests, isn't it? I was a teacher for many years and a forest schools leader. So that capturing those 7 to 11-year-olds.
And they just come alive. Children just come alive with these sorts of things, you know. They really do. I know what I did as a child as well, you know. I spent my life walking from Yarmouth to Winterton on the beach, you know, because I was kicked out at 9 o'clock in the morning and told not to come back till tea time, sort of thing, you know. So in those days, I just spent my life on the beach. Yeah. And I'm sure that's where my understanding of clouds and weather systems and all that sort of thing came from, because that's what I was experiencing. Yeah. Yeah, this was all part of these trees here. You couldn't really chainsaw them because you don't know whether they're carrying shrapnel. Originally, it was a big estate owned by the Ogilvy family, and so you have got some prize sort of non-native trees that are planted as part of it, but most of it is an oak ash woodland. Yeah. And of course, you can tell the difference once you move from dry to wet. The oaks tend to be more in the dominant on the wetland with the ash. When you move up, you get ash, and then you'll get birch and pine. So you can see the difference in the sort of habitats for the vegetation. That's what I did in the RSPB, is buy land and turn them into create nature reserves. And it's that, again, you see, that's that big picture thing. It's understanding how a landscape works is so important if you're going to recreate one. So not only do you have to do your research to see what was there before, but you also just look at the different vegetation, and that tells you what the soils are and how the soils are operating, and then you design it, because it's not much point trying to build, you know, a wetland on a heath. No, there isn't. I mean, that's very basic. I don't mean to sound patronising, but, you know, it is that understanding of the landscape that's so important.
So how did you go into researching a piece of land? Because I can't get my head around, you know, you go into work in the morning and start the process of buying a huge amount of land. How do you research the land? Do you sort of come and take samples, or?
Yeah, we started off originally when I was there. We did a mapping exercise of all the coast, for instance. Which bits would you like if it ever came up? Which bits are already there? Which bits would you expand? So you do that sort of cerebral thing of, you know, if I had the opportunity, what would I buy? Yeah. And then you start to look down, you hone it down to key ones that you would definitely have if they ever came up. And to be prepared, you then do desktop hydrological studies, ecology studies, soil studies, etc. And then if it did come up, well, then you're on there quite quickly with levelling surveys and looking for waterways higher and understanding flows of water and all that sort of stuff. So it's not a quick process. Sometimes it is, but the thing we were always tried to do was be prepared and have the knowledge in our back pocket if anything did come up. So when Lakenheath came up, we knew, obviously it was fenland, we knew it was on the fen edge, we knew that there were sand ridges through it, which were the bases of the old rivers before the peat was blown away. And we knew it had been planted up as a poplar plantation, so therefore it would have, you know, lots of water. We knew it was U-shaped, we knew it went a metre from one end to the other. We knew we could move water around it at least 3 times before it went back into the river. So when that came up for sale, you were able to just walk in and say, yeah, we'll have it.
We'll have this one.
And then you negotiate the price down to a realistic price and
off you go.
And buy it.
Sounds a fascinating job.
It was. I had an absolute blast.
Yeah.
Richard Powell, thank you so much. That is fascinating. I know, Sally, you've got a lot out of that, haven't you? Because this is very much your thing, and that's one of the reasons I'm so pleased to have you with us. But what a wealth of knowledge, what a wealth of experience, and thank you for sharing that.
It's a pleasure.
And so educational to know what we have to do. Let's get, as you say, let's get on and do it, and preserve these places and help and learn from them and expand them. Yeah. Help us, we know we can make money off them. We know we can help fight climate change up from them, and we know we can do so much more to protect our coastline. It's a bit of a no-brainer. It is a total no-brainer, in fact. Richard, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. And Eastern Promise is a great thing, so it's nice to be part of it. So it's I listen to every episode. So,
blimey! Thank you very much.
So it's nice to be able to have the environment in there as well. So it's
an absolute pleasure to have it featured. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you.
That's just a snippet of the full tour of Minsmere, and you can find the extended cut in the podcast feed, which is very much worth your while. Sally and I, not to mention the silent presence of Engineer 49, are tremendously grateful to Richard for his time, his wisdom, and not least for that unsolicited testimonial at the end there. Next week, I'll be talking to Susan Gowling, founder of Laptops for Learning, which fights digital exclusion across the region by bringing refurbished ICT equipment to those who need it most. It's a hugely inspiring story of philanthropy meeting opportunity, and from that, something truly special has been created. And speaking of truly special things, we'll be taking a bite with a Y out of the Norfolk Developers Conference, NordevCon 2023, and talking to conference goers and speakers alike to gauge the huge potential on display and in the audience. Not one to miss. And if you're thinking to yourself, Mike, why don't you cover this event, talk to that person, visit that place, then get in touch by emailing mike@easternpromise.site and tell me more. I don't know what I don't know. And now, somewhat aptly, this one was a bit of a damp squib, but on the bright side, it'll blow over quickly. Yes, it's time to look at what you like to do when the weather is wild in this week's
CROWDSOURCERY.
Yes, CROWDSOURCERY. Well, you can't win 'em all. Here I am on the genteel Sizewell seafront, with the rain beating down and the wind carrying the smell of Adnam's hops out to sea. And I'm here to demonstrate CROWDSOURCERY in action. For it was Penny Bartram, one of our little community of crowd-sorcerers, who suggested the Under the Pier show. Confusingly enough, not actually under Southwold Pier, in response to an earlier crowd-sorcery on mechanical marvels. And Team Eastern Promise duly came and gave it a try. And what a fantastic festival of quirk it is. Let me just put my money in the slot of this fortune-telling machine. And let's see what it has to say. Error 404, human not found. Don't give up the day job. Anyway, whilst we're sheltering here, it seems an opportune time to see what Michelle Sorrell, volunteer manager who is passionate about campaigning, public affairs and stories, has to say about rainy days in the east of England. In fact, she's offering her sympathies to another friend of the show, James Lee Burgess, who is just back in Blighty after a tour de force at the Mobile World Conference 2023 in Barcelona. It's safe to say that the only place JLB will be putting the sun cream is the cupboard. Hostess Mostess of the New Anglia Connected Innovation event, Tim Robinson, who is also Chief Operating Officer at Tech East, has a typically refined and erudite set of suggestions. Says Tim, for me, it's either the Sainsbury Centre or Kettle's Yard, if I'm feeling cultured. A snowy walk along the River Deben to blow the cobwebs away, or a pint by the fire in the station in Framlingham, if neither of the above. But I think many, if not most of you, will share the phlegmatic British approach of this week's special guest, Richard Powell OBE, Environmental and Charity Advisor and Independent Chair. No such thing as bad weather, just the wrong clothes, as Billy Connolly says. Bad weather on the beach is fab, so Overstrand or Winterton are good walks. Bad weather, i.e. rain, in Woodland is superb. Thetford Forest, Wolves Wood near Hadley, Wayland Wood Watton, but if it's really bad, Norwich Castle or Duxford are my go-tos. Though it's ancient custom on this show to give the last word to the week's guest, David Fieldhouse of Local IQ has cleverly found a loophole by agreeing with Richard Powell and adding, "I'm with you on this, Richard. Outside is better than inside. I'll be out for a wander at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning." If you're also wandering at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, keep an eye out for David. And that's all she wrote, folks. Thank you, as ever, to my crowd sorcerers. What you lacked in numbers this week, you more than made up for in grim determination not to let the weather stand in your way. Thank you once again to the wonderful Richard Powell OBE, to Stuart Catchpole of New Anglia Lep, to Eastern Promise's newest recruit, Sally Osborne, from whom you shall be hearing in the future, and to Engineer 49. Now, fun fact. Did you know his favourite colour is green? What? I didn't say interesting, did I? And most of all, to you. Eastern Promise is growing and going from strength to strength, and it's thanks to your support, your encouragement, and your time. I'll be back next week. So until then, bye for now.